community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, could artificial intelligence make human work more valuable? An AI strategist and TEDxJacksonville keynote speaker explains why competence should take priority over competition. Then, some of the earliest learners celebrate one of the state's best teachers. We meet a statewide Preschool Educator of the Year. And Mariners throw what else? A pirate party to raise money for a Propeller Club charity. We'll tell you where you can find the boarding action. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The federal government shutdown is over now that Congress has passed short-term spending legislation. The House approved the bill last night. That happened after an independent and 7 Democrats agreed to vote with Republicans in the U.S. Senate earlier this week. In exchange, they won a promise from Republican leaders to hold a Senate vote next month. It will be on a Democratic bill aimed at renewing subsidies for health care insurance premiums. This is for policies through the Affordable Care Act. NPR's Barbara Sprunt says its success is not clear.
Looking to see how Senate Democrats craft a bill to address the subsidies. Can they do it in a way that brings enough Republicans on board? If they're successful, they'll start the year with a policy victory. And if Republicans don't support it, Democrats still have what they say is a winning issue, healthcare, to campaign on.
NPR's Barbara Sprunt reporting. But even if the Senate does pass the Democratic health care subsidy bill, it's not clear that the Republican-led House would even take up the measure. Although the shutdown is over, the federal government is still continuing to slow air traffic. It has been reduced by 6%. Officials say it will hold there until more air traffic controllers are able to return to work. Congressional Democrats are warning the nation's governors that federal immigration officials are accessing data from people's driver's licenses. NPR's Jude Jaffe-Block has more.
A group of 40 Democratic senators and representatives sent a letter Wednesday to 19 governors from their party, urging them to block ICE's access to their residents' driver's license data and photos to stop the Trump administration from using them from what the lawmakers call, quote, unjustified politicized actions. States share their residents' driver's license data with each other and law enforcement across the U.S. and Canada through a nonprofit called NLETS. The lawmakers say ICE and Homeland Security investigators have made hundreds of thousands of queries through NLETS in the past year. 5 states had already blocked ICE's access. ICE did not return NPR's request for comment. Jude Jaffe-Block, NPR News.
Robotaxi company Waymo is expanding its service to include freeway rides in 3 major cities. They include San Francisco. From member station KALW, Suni Khalid reports.
The autonomous taxi service began operating on Bay Area freeways Wednesday morning, expanding its service in the region to San Jose as well. Waymo is also adding freeway routes to Phoenix and Los Angeles. Waymo says freeway routes will initially be offered to riders who have early access to Waymo's advanced features before they are gradually offered to all. The company says it's planning to expand service to other cities over time, including Atlanta and Austin. For NPR News, I'm Suni Khalid in San Francisco.
You're listening to NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is now 9:04. A Jacksonville task force set up to address the rising cost and limited availability of childcare in Jacksonville gathered for the first time yesterday afternoon at City Hall in downtown. In the coming months, the 21 child care experts, nonprofit leaders, parents, and other members hope to find ways to improve access, affordability, and quality of child care for the city's working families. One member is Yasmina White, the mother of two, who told Mayor Donna Deegan in May about a child care crisis that forces mothers out of the workforce to care for children who need structured education long before first grade.
Early childhood education is a precursor to any successful K-12 education. We need to think of it in that light. We need to think about it as early childhood education. Our kids are successful from cradle to graduation and getting the necessary tools and aspects of life at an early age. And we got to catch them right there before they turn 5.
The task force was established as part of Deegan's broader commitment to making Jacksonville more affordable and accessible, according to her office. Our warming trend continues today here in Northeast Florida. Highs will reach the low to mid 70s nearly area-wide this afternoon. No rain in the forecast, and we'll have clear skies. Overnight, dry conditions with lows in the low to mid 40s inland, and it'll be in the lower 50s for areas closer to the coast. Clear skies, calm winds, and warm temperatures both tomorrow and Saturday.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation. Luminescence Foundation is dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, winning in an AI job market. We talked to an artificial intelligence strategist who says the goal shouldn't be competing with the system, but becoming more human. Later in the program, celebrating the work of early educators, we talk with a local pre-K teacher of the year. But first, in the 3 years since generative AI became broadly available to the public, there's been a lot of concern about its power for economic disruption. My guest today says that while AI impacts are real, there are also real limits to its impacts in the workplace. Here to tell us about what she's defined as the synthetic ceiling is Svetlana Makarova. I'm working on it. Makarova. So Svetlana Makarova, she's an AI strategist and a product leader at Mayo Clinic. She's also a keynote speaker at the upcoming TEDxJacksonville event. Svetlana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your interest in all things AI and the work that you do sort of began early in life. You kind of had an early interest in psychology, and that pursuit and that interest sort of broadened into what you do now. Can you help us understand sort of what your early fascination was and what the connection is to the work that you do today?
Yes. So I've always been fascinated by psychology, understanding humans, understanding how we interact with each other. So I wanted to kind of put that to use, but initially I wanted to go into medicine. So I thought that's how where my calling was, but ended up in the digital space. So actually creating digital products for healthcare institutions. Then I went to work with AARP, working on creating solutions for the end consumers. And then more recently, I've been working at Mayo Clinic, also developing digital experiences, often using artificial intelligence at its core. And on the side, also been teaching and advising companies on how to leverage artificial intelligence in their organization. But throughout, one of the things that I tend to preserve, and maybe one of the things to note, is that AI has the IQ. So you can build these systems to be very predictable. You can build kind of a resilient organization. But there's always going to be that human angle. What AI lacks is that human judgment. That's why there's so much talk about human in the loop, involving humans in the experiences. So that kind of fascination of the psychology and then understanding how we can actually build that resiliency in the age of AI has really stuck with me throughout my experience.
How has your knowledge of an interest in human psychology allowed you to evaluate people's reaction to AI? Because it is anxiety provoking in a lot of people.
And I think, and you're right, one reason I would say behind that before answering that question is it's the fear is instilled by not knowing what the AI capabilities are and then being afraid, not understanding where we have a role in the future where as AI advances. So, because I think we're being sold the story that AI will systematically take over everything, it's going to be able to take over complete tasks. I mean, you're seeing AI winning math Olympiad leaderboards. You're seeing AI creating music that's winning awards. It's outscoring doctors on medical exams. It's outscoring doctors on all of these other kind of tasks we talked about before the show. So it builds fear. All of these headlines build fear in, I would say, like the rest of us who think, well, if AI is advancing so quickly, then it's soon going to be coming for my job. But I think that there's clear, I would say, indicators that show us that that's not the case. There's going to be a point where AI will hit a synthetic ceiling, a point where there's just not going to be data available for it to tap into our uniquely human qualities that I call our human margin, and that's the topic of my TEDx talk. And then there's 5 uniquely human capabilities that I think become more valuable as AI advances. And that's where our resilience lies, regardless of how advanced AI becomes.
And so your idea is that, and I think it's interesting that you kind of give AI the IQ. I mean, that is something you're saying is not really a competitive area for humans.
Yes.
But you suggest sort of looking at one's job and trying to figure out what are the things that are uniquely human or require skill sets that AI doesn't offer.
Correct.
So there are some jobs where AI seems especially,
Mm.
powerful, or in a position to really impinge on someone's future.
Yes.
So what are those kinds of jobs? And are there ways, even in the context of those jobs or careers, that people can build up a little bit of resilience to remain valuable in their job?
Yes. Maybe to start off with, an interesting report for those who are not familiar with to look up is the World Economic Forum report that was published in 2025 of this year, but it was looking into data of 2024. And it looked at global executives and business leaders, understanding what are the qualities that they're looking for amongst their job force. I can tell you that among the top 5 is not even the tech fluency. So it's the critical thinking, it's the analytical thinking, it's it's all of these human capabilities that are distinct from artificial intelligence. Can it do it? I would say to some extent, but what really separates us is the experience that we have built over the years in the job field that we have. So
I mean, so you're saying that that study showed that employers themselves are not prioritizing your knowledge or ability to use AI. Like they're not looking at whether you can use or whether you're familiar with AI.
Correct. Tech fluency is and artificial intelligence fall in that bucket. So understanding how that could be simply taught, right? You can prompt the system, you can retrieve that information. So getting to use the technology is not important. Understanding how you could actually be, whether you're a critical thinker and how you can actually use the domain expertise within the industry that you're applying it. Now that's really interesting to the employer. So you can work amongst, and I think the truth and the reality is that new chatbots are emerging every single day, it seems like, right? So understanding how you can actually prompt with the technology and prompt the technology and how you actually use it, it's not as important because everyone's becoming a technologist now. So what's becoming and emerging as an important set of qualities is how can you be empathetic? How can you build more of that intuition, the mental models within your industry to be able to apply them to solve problems, to come up with new innovative solutions? Now that's interesting, and I think that's what that report highlights. So when you're talking about job replacement, what jobs are at risk? They're the ones that have more repetition. So things that you tend to do on a regular basis, whether it's, inputting data into the same field. So the database entry types of jobs is very repetitive. You can build very simple OCR systems and you can automate away.
What's an OCR?
optical recognition system. I'm sorry, optical. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just generally speaking, though, it's a system that
It's a system that enables you to take an image, so almost like a JPEG image, and if it contains text, you can convert it into something that is machine readable.
Gotcha.
So, and apologies because I'm having a brain part moment for a second, but you can build these systems, and there's available technology to use that. So, there's ways to automate those jobs away, and those are the things that may not require as much of the analytical, the complex thinking. It's very repetitive, right? So, but jobs that do require more of the domain expertise and actual critical thinking and that experiential learning will survive no matter what. This is where I would say, I think prior to the show, we talked about doctors. Well, when you talk about physicians, one of the unique aspects that they bring to the table and why their experience really matters is being able to treat very complex types of patients. And so, one of the things that experience builds is, you build these new connections in your brain that allow you to solve new problems in new ways or encounter new situations, and then use your experience to be able to solve those new problems successfully. So physicians, and I talked about the work that I do at Mayo, is they encounter these unique patients that come to Mayo with at advanced stages of their disorders, and sometimes the occurrence of that particular condition is 1 in a million. So by definition, that's not enough data for AI to be trained on. So even if you did provide all of the circumstances, the data back to artificial intelligence, the chance of it seeing that specific scenario has been very little. So, and the chance of it predicting the right corrective action or maybe the treatment is going to be low. But you hand that patient to a provider who has been treating patients with different ramifications of that particular conditions, and they've seen all different angles of treating that condition, they're much more successful in encountering that new situation and then being able to treat that patient successfully, which they didn't need the data. They needed the experience, they needed the critical thinking, they needed the human connection and understanding what's actually happening with the patient to be able to ask specific questions to get to the root cause. AI can't do that, and those are the types of jobs that is going to be always going to be hard to replace.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to TEDx keynote speaker Svetlana Makarova about the promise and peril of AI in the workplace. You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email comments or questions to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. So practically speaking, you work at Mayo, for Mayo. You also consult on a much wider basis for a lot of companies. But when you have a healthcare provider that is looking to integrate AI into its systems for efficiencies, for example, what are you trying to, what is the first thing that needs to kind of be a green light for you say, this is an appropriate use of AI, this is an inappropriate use of AI? How do you know if it's going to satisfy the need of the user or the educator or the patient or whoever is involved?
A lot of the solutions that I've been focusing on have been more provider facing. So, and it's kind of interesting in that, we are always designing these systems to be of convenience to the provider, but ultimately they're the decision makers behind the tool. So, some of the things that we've kind of developed were preparing a provider for an appointment where we're curating a lot of the data and we're summarizing the data that they need to see for the patient. Whether they choose to use that tool or the insights from that report is really up to them. We give them the optionality to see it, but the decision behind whether or not to use those types of tools is always behind the human. And same thing when you give the providers the optionality, whether they want the convenience of us doing the work and automating a lot of that curation, something that we've learned that they're already doing. Maybe they don't trust the tool. They can always go back to the system of record, which is the electronic healthcare system, and to be able to curate that data themselves. But once we start build trust with them that this system actually does something that they are already doing, and then they can trust the results that we've output, they can start to provide, they can start to lean in more into our tool. But that optionality, I would say, is going to be key, not to force, especially, end users into a specific workflow. Um, and, when I haven't worked on clinical decision tools specifically, but even in the clinical decision tool space, there's always going to be that optionality. And this is why electronic health record systems require providers to sign off on specific decisions, whether they're orders placed, whether they're discharging a patient, whether they're, signing off their clinical notes. The decision, even in our traditional systems, the way healthcare is built, is always behind the human. So, and one of the things that we've been told pretty early, so even if we do create tools that can automate some of that order placement and things like that, it would always require a human to be able to make that last point decision, because they need to make sure that the decisions or the recommendations that these AI systems are done kind of meet their experiences, meet their expectations, and meet their kind of recommendations themselves. We are seeing more and more systems that in instances where people delegate too much, and I feel like companies and individuals are being burned by that as well. When you just automate away, the summarization, automate away the reporting. I think either McKinsey or Accenture was recently even sued over a case where, they trusted the report and they submitted it as their kind of own to one of their clients, and they got, in trouble for that. And the reason why they got in trouble is because some of the sources that were mentioned in those reports were hallucinatory, so they never really existed.
Yeah.
We had another case with law and things like that. So I think individuals are really smart. I think that there's a stat that 90% of people are already using artificial intelligence. They know the kind of the downsides and the downside impact. So as technologists, the key that problem that I'm also solving, in addition to solving an actual problem, business problem, is actually building trust with AI so that they can trust these systems. So early on, you do really need to provide optionality to build that trust and to build that kind of confidence in these systems.
I want to ask you about, kind of referencing, for instance, somebody who's using it in a legal environment, citing cases that didn't exist, or somebody in a business environment citing, examples of something that didn't exist or proofs that didn't exist. And it has to do with something that you've written about called the productivity paradox, which is basically this idea that while AI can be very efficient and helpful for people who are working at certain levels, doing certain kind of tasks, that some higher level operations, people who are tasked with doing more complicated work, that AI reliance can actually be detrimental. So that, there's certain kind of easily automated tasks where somebody is able to use AI and they become much more efficient as an employee. But people who are working at a higher level, in terms of the job that's required of them, they actually become less productive or less good at their job when they're using AI. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. There's actually two studies to kind of that end up at the same conclusion. Basically, one that studied tasks that were given to, I believe they were consultants who were using artificial intelligence to do some specific research. One were using, the control group were not using generative AI, the other group was using generative AI. And the distinguishing factor, another angle that they brought to it, is the experience. So how senior these consultants were versus how new to the organization. So these were novices. So they noticed that AI was able to amplify novices kind of levels and skills. So they were able to complete tasks faster, but the quality of their output was significantly higher and would almost match what the expert would be able to produce. So you could see a huge gain over people who are less experienced in their field. They're just coming in from college or whatever. But the novices have the experience. They know the kind of the judgment in their field. They have kind of the analytical thinking that they can apply. So they're much more judgmental towards the AI output. So they weren't as trusting, I would say, to a lot of the findings that they were producing. But ultimately, they were slower, and the amplification they saw with the quality of their work was significantly smaller because, again, in cases it would slow them down because of that judgment. But two, they already kind of knew their stuff. So then the amount of help they needed from AI was not as large as someone who was just coming new in the field. There's a different study that was done with, I would say, with the coders. So another common application within AI space is using it for coding, so programming. And they also did a control group with that was using no Gen AI, and then the other one was who was using Gen AI. And the hypothesis was is that, oh well, since AI has been so great at coding, both of these groups are going to be great at improving kind of the quality of their work. What they actually found is that AI slowed those groups down. And so instead of actually improving efficiency and the speed at which they're developing, it actually slowed those groups down. If you think about it again, they had some experience to be able to drive through code. So AI is not great at writing end-to-end applications. So they spent more time deciphering what the AI produced than the time it would actually take for them to write the entire code themselves. So that's kind of the interesting angles that we're kind of seeing is that it does improve people who are newer to the field, so it helps them improve and in their quality and maybe learn new things. But the other angle is that it does tend to slow down experts or people who already have the experience and the build. One other study I'd like to note that I think is commonly cited, I think as kind of this scary factor, is that there was another study, I believe it's done by MIT, who compared groups of students who were asked to write an essay. And then they were asked to write an essay on a specific topic. One was using Gen AI, the other one wasn't. And so everyone was thinking like, oh yeah, they're going to be evaluating the quality of their output. They weren't. What they were actually judging is the recall rate of these students based on the content that they actually produced. So the content that these Gen AI enabled kind of individual produced failed at citing the content they produced themselves together with AI at 83%. So 83% of the individuals were not able to cite the arguments, the thoughts that they were basically inputting in their essays versus 11% of the control group, which tells us when you're relying too much on AI, you tend to delegate too much that you're not learning yourself, right? So, and I think this is what's also maybe happening with these novices is why, they're delegating too much, but are they truly learning? Are they truly building that kind of human resiliency?
I mean, not learning is one concern. The other is something that's called a cognitive deficit, which is this idea that you could have a skill set. And, I absolutely feel like I've endured that through the arrival and adoption of spell check, just a skill set once that existed that doesn't exist anymore. And so people can use AI to become more efficient in the workplace. And very often it helps the product that they're creating. They can do it faster and sometimes they can do it much better. But are they then putting themselves at risk of losing those skills forever?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we spoke about this briefly, but think about just phones. So with the emergence of smartphones, how many people, and I ask this randomly sometimes during the time, but how many individuals in your phone do you actually remember the 10-digit number of? So, and they'll say like it's the same 3 people I've known who haven't changed their phone in the last 3 years, but you've been adding people, but you just don't need to rely on the skill of actually memorizing or writing down their phone number. Sometimes we can even share contacts between phones that we don't even ever see the actual phone number, right? So certain skills are going to go away, especially they're repetitive. It's something that is not a human skill that helps us advance, I would say, is going to, go away. I mean, some of the things that we don't use calculators or we don't do math by hand anymore because we have calculators, we have advanced math systems, we have Excel, some computation that's done even in the programming and the development world. They're very complex algorithms that we have automated away because it's so time consuming for us to do some of these tasks on our own by hand that it probably makes sense for us to delegate those things to, AI or just traditional software technology. But there are going to be some skill sets as, spell checking. I think we talked about as a use case. You have Grammarly, you have all of these capabilities that all you have to do is type. And you don't have to worry about grammar. You don't have to worry about phrasing or following specific English rules. Well, I think, again, coming down, going down, coming coming back to my idea of the human margin, our human margin is building the experiences and the thoughts and the innovation and the intuition and the human connectedness. I think those are the skills that we have to protect, and those are the skills that AI will not be able to ever automate. So I would say, personally, I think it's okay that some of these skills get automated, because as long as we preserve our human angle, our ability to innovate beyond these machines. If you think about Leonardo da Vinci, he created solutions 150 or 200 years in advance of when they actually came to market. So there were other innovations that came to market completely, accidentally. If you think about penicillin, if you think about Post-its, there's just so many of these innovations that did not require, these, again, writing skills, calculation skills, that, if we can preserve the innovation, if we can ask people to use these AI machines to innovate with, to ideate with, to connect different ideas from different fields that they may not be aware of. And that's a really interesting use case. So if you're looking to build resiliency in the age of AI, how do you develop these skills? And how do you leverage AI to help you with that? So if you're working in the healthcare industry or maybe finance, but you want to get inspired by physics or chemistry, but you don't want to spend 4 years getting a degree in that, leverage AI to be able to close in those gaps. And that's where we know AI can help with, is if you're a novice to this field, it can help quickly close those gaps. So help them close this gap, but keep the intent of why you're using this generative AI. Bring the expertise in the domain expertise that you have in that field, but marry it. Again, use AI as a collaborator to close the gaps that you have, to be able to innovate and then really push your ideas further over those boundaries.
And that is great advice if you're trying to kind of expand into another area of expertise. But just the skill set of being, for instance, an innovator, because we know that AI is quite effective for people. It's very often used, and it's very, very good at brainstorming, or kind of creating, mind mapping, they call it, sort of just helping people think about solutions, think about alternatives. And it has this enormous data set to pull from of all of these creative things that people have done. And so at what point does that break from being, an effective tool to being a detriment? If your power of innovation and the role of creativity in your job, whatever you do, is important to maintain that human advantage.
And I think going back to the example of the Post-its and the penicillins, and how they were discovered, some of the best innovations that were discovered by accident. And so the human uniqueness comes from the randomness, from the imperfections that we have. And again, AI is the opposite of that. It has a specific goal. It predicts patterns. It optimizes and minimizes error. It looks for perfection. So where we shine, I would say, as humans, is preserving those failures. So again, Post-its wouldn't have been invented if someone didn't fail at creating an adhesive glue that was not just as sticky as that they would have hoped.
Right. They're perfect for a Post-it, but they're not good for anything that they were initially being designed for.
Yes, 3M, I think, were looking for a super adhesive, and then they ended up finding this weak adhesive, and they're, and I completely accidentally discovered that this was a thing. AI would have thrown out that experiment and said, no, we need to optimize for a super glue.
Yeah.
Disregard that experiment. But that's where most of the innovations are born. Think about, again, penicillin. There was mold that contaminated the petri dish sample that killed the bacteria, that made a scientist think, oh, that's not a failed experiment. We shouldn't throw that out. We should look into it.
Yeah.
Right. So those are, I would say, the innovations that the failures, I would say, are competitive moat. And I say it's never a failure. It's either a learning or a success. You never fail. You're always kind of learning. And that's the opposite frame for how these AI systems are optimized and trained. You're looking for predictable patterns within the data that it's been trained on. But one of the other gaps that AI cannot do is it cannot go beyond, it cannot reason and think and really explore ideas beyond its trained data sets. And this is where, again, going back to that Leonardo da Vinci's case, he thought of flying planes by studying, how birds were kind of moving and how they were landing, and looking at kind of the physics of of light penetrating, or the sound, or the wind penetrating their wings, and came up with, I would say, 300 or something like that drawings, or, of just flight. 200, I would say, years before it actually came into being. Like, we're now flying planes, but during his time there was no such thing. So there was not a Wright brothers developing a flying plane. So we're able to think beyond our time. AI is limited by the data it's been trained on, and they can just think within those limits and help you brainstorm, but ultimately you bring that innovation forward.
Well, it is a fascinating topic, and I know it's going to be an amazing TED Talk. The event is at UNF's Lazara Performance Hall. It's January 17th, and it's an all-day event. We've got a link to all of the speakers at the TEDxJacksonville event on our website. But Svetlana Makarova, thank you so much for being here. It was nice to talk to you. Really great to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next, a Jacksonville teacher wins Preschool Educator of the Year. We ask her about her approach to teaching young minds and her statewide recognition. Welcome back. My next guest has devoted her adult life and her career to educating some of Jacksonville's earliest learners, and her classroom work has recently earned her statewide recognition. Here to tell us about it is Kerstin Teutonico. She is a junior kindergarten teacher with the Jewish Community Alliance. Kerstin, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations. I understand your kids call you Mrs. T. So
They do.
yeah, it's a little easier than Teutonico, but so how does it feel, first of all, to be recognized for your work on this level?
It was completely overwhelming in the best way, but I feel like it's highlighting what we do at our preschool each and every day. Every teacher in our preschool works diligently to build connections with the children and to spark curiosity and to get them to be critical thinkers. I listened in on your previous guest, and AI cannot do what we instill in these children. And it's something that we were missing during the COVID years, where we couldn't make those bonds with the children. And this is what we do each and every day.
What is it that brought you to teaching in the first place?
I always had a love for children, and I noticed that I was able to make connections with them very easily. And to live with children, to really get into their minds, to be in their world, it's just magical. And just to be able to take time with them to figure out what they're trying to investigate is magical.
It is not a skill set that everybody has, and some would say not a lot of people have. It is, first of all, it requires enormous patience, and it is not necessarily something that most people are kind of able to invest that much of themselves in drawing out this younger person who may not be super articulate, who may not be in control of all of their emotions in a lot of ways. So when you have a classroom of new kids to you, what is the first thing that you do to kind of establish a relationship with them?
That is exactly what we do for the first few weeks, if not months. We make sure that we establish a connection with each and every child. We take our time, we talk to them, we just sit down with them and get to know the child who they are, because everybody brings their own story, and we share our story with them as well. We get down with them. We make bodily contact when a child, like you said, has a breakdown and they are not able to control their emotions just yet. Then we get down with them. We ask them, what can we do to help you? And we breathe with them. We give them hugs to where they can feel us breathing, to be able to really channel their emotions, to calm down, to soothe themselves, which is what we should do with some of the adults that cannot channel their emotions either.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID. Have you seen lasting impacts on the profession of teaching or on just kind of children? And I mean, obviously, the kids that you're teaching, many of them practically post-date, the pandemic. I mean, they're not necessarily having memories of that because they're
Yes.
pre-kindergarten, a lot of them.
Yes, their social emotional development was very delayed, it seemed like, especially when we had to go to the classroom, when the teachers and the children at the time had to wear masks.
Yeah.
Emotions, you can read emotions on the whole face when you only have the eyes to look at. It was really hard to bring across emotions. Teaching phonics, how to pronounce certain words was really, really hard for children to understand because they couldn't see the bottom part of our faces.
Sure. Do you hear from teachers who are teaching older kids that you were teaching during that period? Have they seen that as a lasting deficit in terms of the skills that those kids had?
I spoke to speech pathologists, and they said they've seen an increase in that.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So the work that you do with kids, there's a lot of opportunities with kids at that age to shape them and to open their minds to different ways of thinking and learning. What examples have you seen in your own work of something that you can tell has really opened up an avenue for a kid or allowed them to express something that they might otherwise have struggled with?
What we do at the JCI is we talk to every single child. We try to spark curiosity. We don't tell them the answer when they ask a question. We always bring the question back to them. We try not to view the children as empty vessels where the teacher is just throwing all their knowledge into them. We're trying to pull it out of them. And that is a skill. It's an art that is so inspiring. And I've seen when you have a young child and you see it in their eyes, that boom, that light bulb went on, and it clicked. They understand what they're trying to investigate. That is magical.
So how has our thinking changed over the last, many years when it comes to best approaches, best practices for teaching kids? Is that something that you've seen in your career evolve in terms of what we know about what works and what doesn't?
Yes, I've always been turned off to strapping children to a chair and making them do worksheets and working on that. And over the years, our approach is that we try to nourish the whole child, their body. Children are not made to sit down unless a child has had something in their hand. They can't comprehend it with their mind. So we have a lot of hands-on experiences. In our school, it has definitely made a change to where we honor the whole child.
Do you have a freedom to kind of operate in a different way than perhaps a more prescribed, traditional public school is when in terms of the metrics that they have to hit or the responsibilities that they have or that they're tasked with?
Yes, we do have the freedom, and that's something I really, really enjoy about my job at the moment. We look at the interests that the child has, and then we weave all of our academics into something that the child really wants to learn about. And that turns the children on to learning as well, and it creates lifelong learners that way. And I appreciate the flexibility that I can bring everything to the classroom that I feel is important as well.
Talk a little bit about teaching just in turbulent times. There's a lot of difficult subjects that come up in the world today. And, kids see and experience difficult things in their own lives. But certainly there are, pressures and events that happen. Are those things that you try to address in your classroom? Are they things that you try to leave to parents to handle at home? How do you manage that? Or is it more on a case by case basis?
It's something that comes up frequently. Children always try to use their fingers as guns or create guns with whatever material they have, Legos, whatnot. And in our classroom, we don't tell children they can't do it. They have to ask permission if they're wanting to play bad guy and police. They have to ask permission of the other child if they can play in that way. If the child says no, we need to respect their preference. But if another child is wanting to process and understand what is going on in the world by playing these games, then we let them process through it. And then we come together as a group and we talk about it. And the children come up with their own rules and guidelines of the classroom as well. We call them agreements.
And so, I mean, that's interesting because obviously there's a lot of anxiety around, particularly guns in schools, and there's a lot of rules governing that in a lot of places. But you think it's best not to sort of tamp that down if kids have a natural curiosity or if they're able to sort of explore difficult topics through play.
What they're showing us is they're trying to understand it. They're trying to figure out what is going on, trying to figure out the power relationship of it. And over the years, whenever I was working in different settings where I had to tell the children, you're not allowed to do this kind of play. We don't use guns here. Then the children were like, "Oh no, it's a fire hose. I'm just shooting fire," or it's a water gun.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get around it because there's really something fundamental that they're trying to process, that they're trying to understand. And then we also address how we listen to one another. That people get angry when they don't hear each other. So we started at a very young age to where children learn to listen to others' points of views. And so hopefully that will help guide them in their play as well.
Talk about technology in the classroom. Is it something that you use? Is it something that is permitted? And what is your feeling about its impact on very young kids?
In our school, we are very inspired by the Reggio Emilia approach, which is a very natural-based, whole body, whole child approach to teaching. We do have certain technologies in the classroom, like an iPad, where the children can document certain things, take pictures, work with technology to look at the tiniest particles of different animals that they're interested in. But the technology in itself, I feel, has no large room in a child's education. The children should be outside working their bodies, being in touch with nature, being in touch with whatever they're trying to understand. And most technology requires you to be stable in one spot and work on it, to where children should work their bodies, work through whatever they're working on. If you don't build the body, you cannot use fine motor skills later on for writing. So you have to work on that first.
And so, is there anything that you would encourage a young, teacher starting out today that you've learned in the work that you've done or the success that you've had that you would encourage them to try or to think about or to work towards?
I would like for them to know to slow down. You have been taught a lot of things in school, but slow down. Be with the children, listen to the children, and don't try to be the teacher that is above the children. Just be with them. Be with them and enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, kids are lucky to have you. Kerstin Teutonico, teacher at JCA. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, the USS Orlick welcomes a band of pirates aboard in the name of philanthropy.
Carol Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com.
WJCT Public Media and the Florida Theater present Jake Shimabukuro live at the WJCT Soundstage Friday, November 14th at 7:30 p.m. Over the past 2 decades, ukulele sensation Jake Shimabukuro has proven there isn't a style of music he can't play. Experience his seemingly limitless musical vocabulary, whether it's jazz, rock, blues, bluegrass, folk, or even classical, on perhaps the unlikeliest of instruments, the ukulele. For tickets and more info, go to wjct.org/events.
Has the American economy become one giant casino?
From the government shutdown to stock market, like gambling has become the status quo.
Speculative investment is up, so are the number of new exotic financial products and gambling on unproven industries. Are they putting the entire economy at risk? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Sudan's civil war began over 2 years ago. It's led to famine, millions displaced, and accusations of genocide. A humanitarian ceasefire is in the works, but a full agreement is yet to be reached. We get the latest and unpack the root of the crisis. Inside Sudan's brutal war. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. A local maritime advocacy group is hosting its 95th birthday with a pirate-themed fundraiser. Here to talk about it is Linda Carrion, president of the Propeller Club of Jacksonville. Linda, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Liz Miller, the group's director. Good morning, Liz.
Good morning.
So for people who aren't familiar, and I think some people are not, what is the Propeller Club? What does it do?
Well, the Propeller Club is a nonprofit that is focused on the maritime industry. So we are advocates for the maritime industry as well as the supply chain. And we've been around, like you said, for 95 years, this 17th of November. And really excited about where we are today. We invite our past presidents to come and kind of see everything that has been built by them, right? We're all volunteers. We have one paid position. So it takes a lot to run the nonprofit and stay alive, especially through COVID and through all of the challenges that we faced, I think, within the last, 5-10 years. And to still, as a nonprofit, be able to continue our legacy is amazing.
So I think back, Liz, like 95 years ago, Jacksonville was a really different place. And particularly when it comes to like its maritime footprint. I mean, this week we're talking about the shipyards, and the new park that's going to be there. I mean, it once was a shipyards, and
Right.
and most of this downtown area was devoted to shipping in a really, central way. Now there's still a lot of areas, especially around the port and Talleyrand, that is still very focused on that. What does the maritime industry in Jacksonville include at this point? What kinds of businesses and industries?
Well, it's very wide now. As we started in, over almost 100 years ago, internationally and nationally, it's in New York, started by just the shipyards, the guys getting together and wanting to build camaraderie and learn more about the bridge, the gap between the community and the industry. So It was solely a maritime industry related organization for a long time. But as we grow and as our ports grow, we include all kinds of warehousing, the car carriers, the shipping, anything maritime, but also our club encompasses an umbrella of everything from the shipper, the warehouser, the truck driver, the ILA on the docks, everybody. There's so
The
many
International
people.
Longshores,
Yes.
Longshoremen Association.
Yes, yes. So our club tries to bridge the gap for all those different, entities within our industry
Yeah.
because there is so many. It is so broad. It's not just maritime anymore. We have the understanding of the components, from when you build a car and how does it get to the dealership. There's a lot of components in there. So we try to include all of those components in bridging that networking gap.
I feel like there's been a greater awareness of maritime industry issues nationally, internationally, but also here in Jacksonville, in part because of, COVID and the disruptions in the supply chain, which was all, about logistics and a lot of that to do with maritime stuff. But then also, maritime tragedies like the El Faro. And so how does that attention shape the work that you do or just kind of your interactions with the community?
I think it helps with the awareness. As we said, it's going to be 95 years of us here in Jacksonville, but most of Jacksonville doesn't know who we are. And like Liz said, it's always been a very tight knit group. But we've learned that inviting other people helps create that awareness. That's what we're advocating for, is to teach the people that don't have that awareness or that understanding of what the maritime industry is.
And so you are doing that, inviting the community in with this pirate party, which is coming up on Saturday, this Saturday, the 15th.
This Saturday, that's right.
So that's open to the public?
That is open to the public, yes. Because it's not only, if you look at it, and I think with any business, it's not just maritime or not just logistics. We have people that manage hotels because the companies need their mariners to come in and stay at times, and we have marketing people, we have finance people that come out. So honestly, it's open to everybody because we all need those kind of services, and that's what creates a strong networking group.
And Liz, who's benefiting from this? I mean, this is a philanthropic event in addition to just being a party and a connection, an opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that the Propeller Club is very proud of. We're turning around and helping those that are looking for a place to go. And that's how we reach out to our colleges. So University of North Florida, we have an endowment scholarship to the Transportation Logistics Society. And then at Kaiser University, we provide scholarships annually for them. And then we're also supporting AMI Kids, which is an organization that takes troubled youth and builds their confidence in the maritime industry. But we go back and we also have connections to help them get more involved into the industry. So we're doing this to help build our scholarships. Yes.
Well, it is going to be, I'm sure, a fun event. We've got a link on our website, but you can also go to propclubjacks.com and look for the Pirate Party. The event is on November 15th. It's from 7 to 10, and it's at the Orlick Museum, which will be a perfect place for a pirate party. Linda Carrion, Liz Miller, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I
so much for
appreciate it.
having
Thank
us.
you.
All right. Thanks for listening. That's our program. If you have comments or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight. You can also find our entire archive on the FCC YouTube channel or at WJCT.org. Join us tomorrow when we discuss all the week's headlines with our media roundtable, from a proposed oath for teachers to a record-setting year for executions. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
Whether it's morning, noon, or night, Classical 24 on WJCT 89.9 HD2 is your classical music companion. The masters, the melodies, and the magic, 24 hours a day.